All right, so we're here for the 201 class of our legacy. and here again with Chaz Shafer. My name's DJ. This is Vanessa. Chaz, thanks for being with us again.
Pleasure.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll do a small recap of.
That's a great idea. Why don't you do that?
Reminding people. So if you're just joining in on this section, we recorded another video that you can watch, which was kind of an introduction 101, so to speak, on legacy and how do we help our families transition. So if if we were to die, or if a loved one was to die, kind of how to best prepare for that. Is that a good way to even intro this, do you think, Chaz?
Yeah, I think best prepare for it and just smooth the transition because it's such an emotional time when those things happen.
Yeah. So how to best prepare for that. So some of the why, I think, is what we talked about in the first section. Mm-hmm. And today is going to be a little bit more of the how and some of the practicals. So if you want some of the why or the intro, you can jump back to that 101 that we've got labeled. We'll put a link for that in this. But today we'll jump in a little bit more to the how. And Chaz is joining us because he's the one that actually knows what he's talking about. And we're going to be the question askers. And we're really grateful for you, Chaz, because you're taking a lifetime of experience and wisdom and expertise too on the legal side and on the side of just living, being a dad, being a follower of Jesus, and using that to kind of share from that perspective. So we really appreciate you investing in us, and I think the other people who are going to watch this too.
Well, very nice. Thank you so much. Just as a further comment on why we do these things, or perhaps should do them, and why it's a godly thing to do, I think a lot of people that have worked in this field, folks I've spoken to over the years, and a lot of financial advisors, they see what happens when you don't do this planning. Mm-hmm. We talk about smoothing the transition. Well, when this planning is not done or overlooked, it doesn't always result in problems, but it can result in very serious problems that divide families for a long, long time, if not forever. So some have said, well, why should we, this is kind of an unpleasant subject, or how do we get others in our family to face this and confront this? I think that's the reason, is we want to not take the chance of creating these kinds of divisions that wreck families. Mm-hmm. And that's what occasionally you see in the line of work I've been in. Mm-hmm. So it's just a precaution. But I know in the case of my father's passing, it just allowed us to focus on the treasured memories we had of him, mm-hmm. and to really be thankful for how he set it all up. Mm-hmm. And to give us inspiration to do that for our families and for people who ask us about it, for our friends as well. Mm-hmm. So there's a good payoff in it, I think, mm-hmm. if you take the risk and bring the subject up.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, let's jump in, Chaz. We've got a long list of great items. And I remember you wanted to mention just a little bit as a lawyer that you're kind of an ex-lawyer. Is that right?
Exactly. And I need to make that very, very clear. I was a lawyer a long time ago. I'm getting right up there,
Oh, come on.
And I'm very well retired from the law. But still, you can't help but have it be part of your day. And there's a lot of times friends call and subject comes up and people ask questions, this sort of thing. So I don't pretend to be an expert. I'm certainly out of date. Yeah. But a lot of this stuff is fairly universal, fairly standard. And there are times when you're going to need, where people who this video are going to need legal advice from their own lawyers, CPAs, and that's just completely appropriate. This list can help people just gather, as we said the other day, all the information in one pile and determine what they can do themselves and what perhaps they can't.
That's right.
So I wanted to say that. And then I also wanted to apologize to Dennis Ramsey the other day. I mentioned Dennis Rainey. I don't know where that came from, but Dennis Ramsey is the real guru when it comes to Christian financial advice. He took over for Larry Burkett after Larry Burkett's passing, as you know. And Ramsey has he has a lot of books. If you look on his website, tons of books about finance and staying out of debt, etc. But he has one, I believe it's called, let's see, the Legacy Project, I think is what he calls it, something like that. And that's a book that goes into a lot of what we're discussing here. He has his own approach with his own family. He puts everything in a box. He calls it a legacy box. And I have used a slightly different approach that I think is perhaps easier, at least in my case. But I did want to give him proper credit.
That's great. We'll make sure and post that in the comments.
Good.
Well, why don't I share the screen and we'll just start working our way through what should be in our legacy file. Sound good?
Very good. Yeah.
There we are.
Hey, excellent. Okay. One of the things that I never learned in law school, or really I had to stumble upon this in practice, was the concept of a letter. You can do this in a letter format, which is a lot less legalese and a lot more, I think, endearing. And so in my case, and I'll just speak personally, in my case, I've started out with a letter to my wife and children and my brothers and sisters, and just talked about what they meant to me, briefly. And then I've talked with them about funeral arrangements. I'd like to be cremated. I got a special place in the mountains, and that's all detailed, and a couple of neat songs I've enjoyed. And the kinds of things that would be meaningful for me, also a celebration of life rather than a funeral right away, those kinds of things. Everybody is different in this regard and will have their own wishes, but you got to put it down somewhere. If you forget, then you might end up in a coffee can somewhere. So anyway, it's a good place to start out a letter. And then, I don't need to read this line by line. People will be doing that as we speak anyway. But I think, again, let me just show you this now. What I have done, and this looks a little intimidating, if I can get it on the screen.
Oh, let me pop that off. Yeah.
Yeah, this is
oh my goodness.
This is a monster book. It's just a notebook 3-ring binder like we take to high school with us. And this is a fairly thick one. And the reason is I've tried to put everything that's of consequence right here in this one place. Huh. So, for example, with insurance policies, and they might come into play, life insurance on someone's death. Normally, the company will eventually send you an original copy of the policy with original signatures, that sort of thing. And then they expect to see that when it's time for payoff.
Oh, you're kidding.
Where the heck is that? Not all companies, but some will require that.
Hmm.
Where the heck did Dad put that? And these are the kinds
where did I put that?
Exactly. So I've tried to put all of the stuff that I can think of in this particular binder, so it's in one place. Jennifer and I know where it is at all times. If we're in Tucson for the winter, we have it with us. If I'm back up at the ranch, I keep it up there. Huh. And my kids know what it looks like and where it is. So then,
do you keep it in like a fireproof safe, or anything in particular as far as that, to keep it from the elements?
Yeah, that's a great question, Vanessa. And that would be an ideal place to put it, is in a safe. I have a very tiny safe.
Yeah.
So it won't fit.
Yeah.
But what I've done is I've digitized most of it and sent a copy to my brother, who's a CPA and will handle a lot of the things, and various forms of it. Medical power of attorney goes to my sister, who's a physician, and et cetera. So, and then I'll have somebody who helps administer this for me.
Mm-hmm.
My son will have a copy, and then a very good friend will have a copy. That's how I'm doing it, rather than a safe. But a safe's a great idea.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Yeah, that's really practical, and I love that idea because that's something we already have a bunch of files randomly throughout our file cabinet that we could just compile into one
Mm-hmm.
3-ring binder, and that would just be a great start in this process. So thanks
Yeah,
for that idea.
absolutely. My dad had a lot of files in his filing cabinet,
Mm-hmm.
but I never really, sometimes they'd refer to something and I wasn't absolutely sure where it was. So
Yeah.
we would go over that and he'd make sure that the file had what it was supposed to have in it. But then going a step further and putting everything in one place, it allows the heirs to pick up that box or that portfolio and say, we got it all right here. Let's sit down and go over it. And you feel comfortable that at least you've got you got your hands, you got your arms around it. So,
Yeah. You know what also stands out to me, Chaz, is when you do that, you also make it easier for yourself while you're living to know where all your stuff is.
Yeah. Not a bad point.
especially as you approach my age and you find that you can't multitask as you used to.
That's
Actually,
great.
that usually is a very important question, and it comes up pretty quickly for folks. Hey, how do we get into the bank account? Mom, I know had a savings account, but and they had a joint account, for example, which wouldn't be a problem. But where was her savings account again? Or is and then you find out when you go down to the bank, yeah, it's here, but she didn't have a payable on death designation on the back of the signature card. So we'll have to wait until a court instructs us on what to do with this cash.
Mm.
So we went over this before, but that could be a real unfortunate delay and create a lot of stress.
Yeah.
And
So
that's
something,
something I have never heard of that. So that's something that, say, I wanted to do that for my children or whoever, my kids are young in this case. So that would be whoever was going to be in charge of caring for them if I were to pass.
yes,
So I would go to the bank and ask them to designate that. It's just like something you need to sign or.
that's exactly right. You go down to the bank and they're used to these questions, and they will have either a signature card that you signed when you set up your account, or they'll
Okay.
have a separate piece of paper and you designate, it's called a POD designation. And so you ask them for one of those forms and you just complete it there at the bank. Sometimes they need to be notarized, and you indicate who the person or persons should be, and
Mm-hmm.
then they can just march right down to the bank and they become a signator on the account immediately.
Wonderful.
Which you said last time, we had this conversation too, is that can be important if, for example, you need to pay immediate bills, for a house or for funeral expenses or other things. If
Exactly.
you're not able to get to that, that becomes a bit of a burden
Yes.
on the heirs if they're not able to immediately start paying bills.
Yes.
So that seems like I've never even thought of that, and that's being pretty important just in
Yeah.
the immediate.
Well, one of the things that is an advantage to doing this kind of planning in advance is, the courts are busy and the
Mm-hmm.
probate court is busy. And if you
Mm-hmm.
have to take things through the court, you got to get on their schedule and their docket, and you usually have to get a lawyer involved, and everything gets more and more complex.
Mm-hmm.
By doing some of the things on this list, you eliminate very simple uh, tasks that would be taken care of sometimes by a court, and you do them yourself, and it's free, it's
Yeah.
easy, and you're in control of it. So
Yeah.
that's good. And we're going to skip around on this a lot, I'm
Yeah.
sure. But
Great.
one of the things that we didn't have at the top there, right above with letter to the wife and family, there you go, is, and again, this is something we touched on earlier, but we all store a lot of our things now on devices and up in the cloud somewhere. And
Mm-hmm.
how do you get into this stuff? We need to have a sheet that describes our current passwords and usernames, etc., so that we have access to documents that may be stored there and in no other place. So I think that that's really important today, particularly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we're down around life insurance. Some people have it, some people don't. But it's really important. What's so helpful there, if you have it all in one file, like with this portfolio I have, and then you can just attach the insurance agent's card, so that it's really simple. When someone looks at that and says, "Oh, there's some insurance. Oh, I see. We call George over here at this number," and give him the policy number, which is right there on the policy, and then they can walk you through what to do from there. You'll have to get a death certificate. And then to get a death certificate, you often have to come up with a birth certificate that's original. And there may be other requirements in different counties or different states, but it gets you on you're on the right roll now, and the agent can be very helpful with
Yeah.
it.
Mm.
Saves lots of time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Chaz, we're gonna copy this document and put it right on the link for the YouTube video. And when we get done here, I'm going to copy and paste all the text into my own document and create a little to-do sheet. And then just over the next few months, I'm just going to start working, checking one off at a time.
Yeah.
As I have time. And so just like the birth and death certificates that are highlighted there, just going to take some time to find those and put those in there.
Mm-hmm.
Or
exactly. Yeah, great plan. It's an excellent plan.
Yeah.
What I have also discovered is that I think I probably started doing this I might have been your age or just slightly older. And you got to keep this stuff updated, because the insurance agent changes, he moves to another state, and all this kind of stuff changes.
Yeah.
So what I have done in the past is take the first week of January, go over to Telluride, and where I can just hole up and go through this thing. But it's really a procedure. And I think what would work better now in retrospect, as I think about it, is if you have this in the way of introductory to your portfolio, DJ and Vanessa, then as things happen each year, and my insurance agent's moved, or this bank has now merged with this bank, then make a note. And just you can do it on your computer or however you like. But if you've got it right there on the first page of when you open this thing, it makes it so much easier to update things once a year, once every other year.
Yeah.
That's a great idea, Chaz. There's probably a really simple way. I use Google Keep. I don't know if you've seen that before, but that's just a little checklist that's on the cloud on Google. But I could keep a Google Keep document with my legacy needs. That would just be a running list. And then at the end of the year, I could just go quickly update all those. So that's a great idea.
Yeah. And Mac computers have something called Notes, or there's another app called Evernote. It's essentially the same thing. Create a little file, and you can make your notes in there as to what you need to update.
Yeah. One question I thought of as you were saying something earlier is, it sounds like each company or place that you're dealing with may have a different policy in terms of what they need for, say, an heir to have something transferred to their name, or if we were to pass away, how would our kids have that? So I wondered, just as an initial step, if it would be good to make a call to the companies that you have, because we each have different banks, different life insurance, and say, when I do pass, what would my children or my heir need in order to have access to my account?
That's another.
Do they need the original copies? Do they need anything? Because then if any of that could be taken care of, then that could be part of the files.
Excellent idea. And particularly with respect to life insurance companies, they all have different forms that they use to designate beneficiaries. And you want to be sure that those have been completed. And that they've been done in accordance with, usually I just have the company send me the form so I know I have the right form. And then I fill it out, and I'll send it back, and then I confirm with them that is that the right form? Have I done it properly? Okay, we're good.
Uh-huh.
So that's basically what you're talking about. It's an excellent idea. And it brings up another thought. Um, when I was your guys' age, I was thinking, well, what, my wife and I'd be traveling off somewhere. What if the plane goes down?
Mm-hmm.
And I got young children. If I got somebody to step in and take over for us, somebody who might do that, a family member, that's a fairly important decision.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't addressed that here, and it's a tough decision. It can be a fairly easy decision, but it's something that ought to go into this kind of planning.
Mm-hmm.
What's that called? Who is that person legally?
Well, I suppose you could call them a custodian,
Okay.
a family custodian.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know of any particular form for it. I think it's a great idea to stick it in a will, if you have a will,
Mm-hmm.
or at least get it designated in something like a portfolio here, so people have some understanding of your intentions.
Mm.
I don't know right off the top of my head what Colorado state law is on that, whether it has to be in a will or it can be in any kind of written document or memorandum.
Mm.
But not a bad idea.
You know, you brought up will, and that's something we've all heard a lot about. Everybody should have a will. Could you give us the what is a will, and do I need a lawyer to fill one out, and what should be in it? Just obviously that's very specific to each person, but could you do a quick will crash course for dummies?
Well, sure. They're a fairly simple document. Where do you want your property to go on your demise? And very often, in most cases, if the husband goes, then everything goes to the wife, and when she goes, then it goes to the children, and often in equal parts. So it makes things fairly simple. But for as much simplicity as there is in that, it goes awry.
Mm-hmm.
Then things happen that are different, and maybe one of the children has some disability, or one is pretty wayward and you're not sure that you trust them with assets. And there's a million different scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
So wills can address this. And the typical thing in a will, it has lots of legalese, but you go into a lawyer and you say, well, we want this, this, and this, and he can put that in legalese form, which is not terribly difficult. As long as your intentions are clear, you can probably do it on one of the websites that offers free or inexpensive will forms. You want to be sure that you click on Colorado or New Mexico, wherever you live, and make sure that you're looking at a will form online that is valid in the state where you live and you are a resident. And that's important. I know in Colorado you have to have two witnesses and they have to sign simultaneously with the testator or the person signing the will. And so there are certain things certain protocol that has to be observed for the will to be valid. Otherwise, it can be challenged in court. So if you're doing something that begins to seem a little confusing, if you're on a website and you're trying to do this on your own, it's not a bad idea at that point to contact your lawyer. And then briefly, I don't know if that's a big crash course. And I would say that there are needs in many cases for trusts. And trusts are a separate entity that you establish so that you have appointed a trustee, somebody who obviously you have trust in and confidence in, to take over and make some of the decisions that are so important, financially in particular, in your absence. So that's why you don't do that with a will. You do that with a trust. But that's again something that not every family needs, and something to talk to your lawyer about.
And while we're on the subject, let's talk about lawyers. Just again, I've heard all kinds of things about lawyers. You're obviously a good one. How do I find a good lawyer if I don't have one already? What am I looking for? Am I looking for family law, or can any lawyer do? How would you suggest to?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what you do is you get out your networking skills there and you talk to some people. If you're brand new in a town, if you're brand new, you just moved in and you're in a different state and you want to put a will together and you need some help. go down to your bank. You probably set up an account. See if you can't talk to one of the, ask them, do they have any officers who are familiar with estate planning and some of the attorneys that work in that area? Maybe the bank has what they call a trust department, and they serve as trustees for families that don't have somebody to turn things over to if both of them, let's say, both husband and wife are in a crash. So often you can start with some good advice in that way. The online or in the old-fashioned yellow pages, lawyers are allowed to advertise their specialties. So you'll see estate planning or family lawyer, and they often have some expertise. But I think networking is a great way to go. Mm-hmm. And if you are in a town and you go to a church and you talk to the pastor and he says, yeah, this particular fellow is fairly adept and he's got some wisdom. Why don't you go talk to him about it? Yeah, I think, I'm not positive, but I'll tell you who's a great lawyer and he'll give you a good referral. Mm. So you can work it that way.
That's really helpful. Really helpful.
And then when you meet with a lawyer, obviously you gotta have confidence in them and like them. I think that's really important in a situation like this.
Yeah, that's right. All right, let's go back to the document here. What else have we not covered that would be helpful to address?
Well, one of the things that you want in your legacy box or portfolio is some kind of outline of what your assets and your liabilities are. So if you probably have a deed to your house and a copy of a mortgage, or if you're leasing, you have a copy of the current lease on the property. And those kinds of things can go in under real estate classification. If you have any stocks, you can put the name of your agent in there if you have one, unless you do everything yourself. Just common sense. And maybe other people today particularly have precious metals because we're in a fairly daunting time in our history.
That's right.
Some people have money that's owed to them from, for example, the sale of their home or another piece of real estate, and they have a promissory note. Somebody has promised to make payments to them, or they have accounts receivable from their work, and those can be detailed. Where are they? And you want to allow somebody to step in your shoes and understand that situation right away from what they see in your portfolio. Mm-hmm. So there's no guessing. Yeah. And of course, liens, encumbrances, mortgages, debts, credit card statements, all of those types of things should be outlined so that people don't miss, somebody doesn't miss paying people, and then there can be consequences. Utilities are shut off, or all kinds of problems. So make sure you have those things outlined, and they need to be updated. Sometimes you get things paid off, but you accumulate a new debt or a new receivable or a new payable during the year. So that's one of those little notes you can make and be sure it's updated.
Yeah.
Credit cards is, important. How do you, that's tough when credit cards they're wary today because they get hacked. And so it's very tough. And maybe you just pick up the phone and call them and say, how do we make sure that our designated representative can get the information from you if they need it, or if they have questions about our account? And like you were saying, Vanessa, find out what their procedures are. And they may just say, well, as long as they have your username and password and your expiration date, then we'll give them the information.
Yeah. Just listening to you and looking through these lists, it just shows me that really going through all the work and doing this once is not really what's needed. This is a new lifestyle that comes with growing up, I guess you could say, and something that just needs to be looked at once a year.
Yeah, that's great, DJ. It's just one of those, I guess it goes with maturity, and responsibility for a family. Families that loved ones, you want to take care of them, so you're willing to invest this effort.
Yeah.
So down around 14, 15, again, simple there. IRAs, where are they? They're probably with a securities company, with Vanguard or TD Ameritrade or whoever. Just make sure that people can find what you have and know the agents and their phone numbers. Some people have safety deposit boxes at a bank, and they can be really tough to get into. The bank's very careful with those. So you want to make sure that you talk to the banker. Again, Vanessa's idea there. Make sure they, you have to know where the key is, first of all.
Mm-hmm.
That's real important. And then who is authorized to have access if they have the key in hand. And there are certain forms that have to be completed there in your absence.
Yeah.
So make sure you've done that. If you have a safe, you better find out where the combo is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, that can be in this document or in this box, or it can be somewhere around the safe. Those are all personal decisions.
Unless the combo is in the file and the file is in the safe.
Then you're in big time trouble.
Good. See, when you go through this procedure, really, I see where it is. Oh, I'm so glad I caught that.
That's so true.
But where is the safe anyway?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, well, insurance is a big issue with this stuff. There's life insurance, and we talked about that above, because that's usually an immediate concern. But what if they were in an auto accident? Where is their auto insurance? Probably in the car somewhere. But who's the current agent, and how do I start processing that? And usually they have deadlines on claims with insurance companies. So you got to get after that right away. Sometimes it's 48 hours. Otherwise, they can say, wait, you didn't do this properly. So home insurance, casualty insurance on any other kind of real estate or automobiles or campers, boats, whatever the situation may be. It's really nice to have all of that in one place.
Yeah.
My gosh, you can end up in this file and that file and over at mom's house with this one, and you can drive people crazy. So we've already talked about birth and death certificates. Yeah. The originals are very important. It's nice to know they're right here along with Social Security cards, because sometimes when you go to the Social Security office to see if there are any spousal benefits in the event of an illness that took one of the spouses, they want to see the original Social Security card. We talked about that before. That's important. Living wills. We all know that's a popular enough subject that we all recognize those documents.
Yeah.
The best place to get one is at the hospital that you would normally go to. They have them for free, and they really welcome you with your questions. Sometimes they'll just turn you over to their attorney if you have really complex questions. And that's all free, and that's all something you're filling out. It's basically your own desires. So, but that is so useful, because think of all these scenarios that develop where mom, it's maybe time to put her in a nursing home. But some of the children say, oh, we could never do that. And somebody says, well, maybe she could live with you. And well, we could never take her. And you end up with these really tough battles, intra-family battles over an issue like that. So living wills can, and if somebody's in a coma or they're not competent, that, especially as it drags out and it gets very expensive, that can create huge family division. So having a living will that's up to date and is specific and answers all the questions can save families. And it's very helpful for health providers too, who don't want to be in the middle of the patient and the family. There's discord. So
that's right. Now it looks like we're getting into some real interesting ones. 20 through 23 at least. Those feel out of my pay grade.
Well,
what do you think about those?
In short, a will, if you decide to put a will together rather than a trust, let's say, or rather than not having any document, and as you know, in Colorado and in many states, they just infer that if the husband goes, everything goes to the wife, and after the wife, it goes to the kids equally. That's basically what most states decide. all bills have to be paid first, and all professionals and everything, of course. So they try to thread the needle in terms of what many people would desire anyway. But if your affairs are more complex than that, for so many reasons, then it's a pretty good idea to have a strategy. And if you have a will, it has to be probated. In other words, it has to be administered by a court. And we have probate divisions in all the district courts in Colorado. And you have to apply there and usually have a lawyer file a probate for you. And you have, in the case of a will, you have a personal representative who's going to take over and administrate the affairs and sign the documents. And all of this starts to involve expense. And of course, if you've got something like this completed, it's far less expensive because most of the pickup work has been done, and it's easier for a lawyer and for the court. But some people don't want to do that. They don't want to go through the delay or the expense of a probate. So that's where living trusts come into play, where you designate a trustee, someone that you have a lot of confidence in, to manage your affairs. And usually they're paid. I think it's a good idea to pay them. If you have a brother or a friend and you ask them to do this, but they're not getting paid and it gets complex, as it almost always does, then they're beginning to put a lot of time in. So I always advise people, just pay them the customary rate so that they feel like they're not being impinged upon. And of course, if they just don't have the time, or they don't have the ability, or they just can't do it with their own family obligations, then you have set up substitute trustees, who can subsequently take over if one trustee just can't do it for whatever reason or resigns. If you have a trust and you put down all the information that goes into them, which is essentially what to do with your estate, then that can be handled inside the family. Or you can have your own lawyer help you, and you don't have to go through the probate process, through a public court process, where your affairs are open to inspection by the public, where there are delays and there's customary expense. So it's a good question for an attorney if you think that you might even possibly want privacy, or that you have children that have special needs, or a parent who has special needs, or something like this. You may need somebody who can make spot decisions. And rather than giving that to a bank to make those decisions, you give it to somebody who you trust and who you know and who's willing to take on the responsibility. And so that's another time when you want to visit with your own lawyer about this and see if maybe that's something that would be good for your family.
Yeah.
Number 21, their last will. You can amend your will anytime you want. You can write it up today, and tomorrow you change your mind. So you can have an amendment to it and update your will that way, and that becomes your last will. And it automatically renders invalid and void your previous will, at least according to the terms of the amendment or the update to your will.
Yeah.
So you have to have a copy of the last will. And it's common to find a will for somebody, but it wasn't their last will. And so then that ends up lending itself to disputes and court battles and things. So it's a great idea to make sure that you've got it all in your legacy box or in your portfolio.
And yeah, let's talk about number 22, powers of attorney and medical power of attorney.
Yeah.
It's something we've heard a lot about lately.
You bet. And it's an excellent idea to do this. And it's very simple. They're usually just a few pages. You can download them. Good idea if you have any questions to get your attorney involved. But if you're incapable of rendering a competent decision, if you got hit by a car and you've had a concussion and or you've had some sort of disease or illness or whatever the case may be, and you just are not competent to make decisions about your family or finances or whatever, it's a good idea to have a power of attorney. And powers of attorney can be for one thing, like to sign this deed at the closing. I'm going to be gone and I need somebody to go in. We're selling our home and I need to have them sign for me. You can give that to your wife if she's on, or you can give that to your son or your daughter. It doesn't matter, as long as you have confidence in them, and they should obviously be of majority age.
Mm.
So you can make a power of attorney that is very general and gives the person that you're naming there under power of attorney the authority to do anything you could do yourself in any matter, or you can limit it widely or generally or very specifically.
Mm.
And when it comes to a durable power of attorney is a special power of attorney that is good if you are incompetent and not capable of rendering your own responsible decisions. And sometimes that may require a couple of physicians to certify that, yeah, they can't think anymore. They're not functioning properly. So the person who has the power of attorney, it's called the attorney in fact, should take over at this point.
Mm.
And if the decision regards medical care or medical issues, it's a good idea to have a separate medical power of attorney. And you can name somebody who's a trusted physician that you know, or a family member who's responsible and knowledgeable and can make decisions like that have to do with your health when you're not in a position to make those things yourself.
That's right. Yeah, that's really helpful. Naming your attorney and CPA, that seems very straightforward.
Keep it up.
Parting? Yeah, keep it up. That's right.
Yeah.
What about parting comments?
Well, let's see. What those, with me, I just said a couple tender things to people who I thought might be reading this material. There's also something that through the men's group, actually, a number of years ago, we thought might be a good idea for many men, and that was we termed it an ethical will, and I think it's probably been done many times. We just thought, let's call it an ethical will. And it's where you impart values rather than financial, asset, debt-oriented sort of things. You impart values to your loved ones, and you got to be careful. I don't know. I have to be careful because usually this is advice offered without being asked for. So, and that's dangerous routine right
there. But if they want to know what Dad thinks, this gives them a chance to. Dad's thought about this, and he's clearly laid out. Here's my values.
Exactly, and I think it's especially meaningful when it's post-mortem, and you're in a situation with your family like this, and you can talk about the things that were dear to your heart, and God comes up first. I'm thinking in my case, and Jesus, and my relationship there, and my failings, and the things that I learned over the years that I certainly wouldn't do again, and just. Let me get rid of this.
The serenade.
Yeah, thanks. So, you know where I'm going with this, and it's just a wonderful time to maybe say things that, in some instances, a person was never able to say, or wished that they had said, but it just never happened. And there are things like that in all of our lives. So here's the opportunity to say something that, in this instance, might be remembered for a long time and might make a real difference. So it's very important, and it's a wonderful idea, I think. Requires lots of thought. You can do it over time and change it and update it and delete things from it, but it's a great idea, I think.
Well, as we close, Chaz, this was, man, what a crash course. So wonderful. I've got at least one question. Maybe Vanessa's got one, and then I think we'll close our time unless there's anything else you wanted to add to this. Here's my question. What about your stuff? I know you probably have a favorite fly rod, that you might want to share with someone? Do you ever, I mean, do you ever pick any of your stuff? Or I know a lot of times it seems like people are saying, well, I want dad's pocket knife, or I want mom's hair
Yeah.
brooch. What do you do with some of
Yeah.
that?
It's a great
Wedding
question.
rings,
Great
etc.
question. In my portfolio, I have something that, and typically lawyers would call this a memorandum disposition of personal property.
Okay.
And it's basically a list of your personal property, not your real property, but your personal property, stuff you can carry around, furniture, cars, fly rods, skis, soccer balls, et cetera, et cetera. And this is where you would handle that. It's very simply done. You make a list, you talk about who you want to take that, any other special instruction or location, anything like that. And then you attach that usually to the trust or to the will so that it's right there and it's all in one place.
Yeah.
Uh,
If you
that's,
do have something you want. Yeah.
I'm sorry?
If you do have something that you care about, who gets it? Because
Yeah.
otherwise it's just going to be split up and the family's going to have to fend for themselves in terms of who
Yeah.
gets it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I can't help, this is very personal preference, but I can't help mentioning this because there's a little humor in it. But I know after my dad passed and then my mom passed, there were 5 kids in our family, and we all came home. Obviously, we were around for the passing and for everything. And when dad passed and we moved mom down to another location, we all pitched in and got our pickup trucks and moved all this stuff in the attic and everything in the storage boxes and took it over to the new house. And we put it all away and made sure everything was labeled and everything was good. Then when mom passed, we realized she had very rarely accessed any of it.
Mm.
And we looked at this, we all asked each other, do you want that? No, heck, I don't need that. How about you? No way. Well, we ended up taking like 2 loads to the dump, huge loads to the dump. And we ferreted out things that could go to Goodwill or to various charities. But most of it was pretty useless. And I thought to myself right at that point, I said, I'm not gonna be a stuffed junkie like my folks were to some degree.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to put my kids through 2 days of taking off work and having to take it all to the dump. But I didn't, I say that only personally. Some people are very attached to a lot of things, and they should be, because it's very nice, and it'll be different for everyone. That's just the way it was for us.
You're saying nobody cares about my 6th grade bronze medal from long jump? Maybe
I have already told him that. But
I've been hanging on to that. I thought about posting it in my garage.
My first pair of fly fishing waders. I don't think anybody wants those.
What does that smell?
Okay. Good question, though, DJ.
That's really helpful. Yeah. Anything else for you?
No, that's really good. I mean, I think it gives me a lot to think about, and kind of like we said, just sort of maybe systematically just start to go through and start to compile. And I'm sure questions come up as we go, but this was a great kind of prodding to get in the direction.
Yeah. Well, there are a few things that I think are enumerated at the bottom of that list that we didn't go over today. Yeah. And if you'd like, we can do a follow-up at some point. We don't have to, but if you want to, because you may think of some other questions. You guys have had good questions today, and you may think of a few other things that we should touch on. And if you do, or if you want to speak about any of the remaining things on the list there that we didn't cover, we can do a 3rd segment here. And I'm going to leave that up to you.
I think so. No, I thought, and this was munchable, what we just did. And this gives us a little chance to process, and then we'll do the final one, going over some of those. And, I'd really like to dig into some of the ethical things as well. Or I call them ethical. Maybe they're moral, or maybe they're just hard. But, they're more the issues of, do I tell people about what the difficult decisions I've made now? Or do I make them deal with it once I'm dead, And I just think there's some real great more processing time that we could do together. So we'll do that in the next one.
Yeah, and I think that is an area where you are much more of an expert than I am.
Mm.
Those kinds of issues, people say, if you go to charm school, I know they say, don't talk about religion and don't talk about politics, or else you're wading in very deep waters. And yet, there are things that we feel very deeply, spiritual things, and in some cases, political things that certainly we all have different opinions. But sometimes parents may want to say something along those lines, or at least quote somebody who, I'm a great, and we all are, I think, but I'm a real enthusiast for Lincoln and for Winston Churchill. And some of their comments, I think that they are so relevant today that I'd like to accentuate those for my kids, for them to at least be exposed to if they haven't already, and think about it. So it's stuff like that, but and then wonderful favorite scriptures or sermons, and we have stuff's online. It's so easy to put links into all of this. So. But you've got great advice there, I'm sure, along these lines.
Well, I look forward to digging into some of that. So we'll
do that
next time.
Okay.
So Chaz, thank you. Thanks for this crash course on our legacy portfolio. I just feel better able to step in. I think from here, for anybody listening, the issue, it's some thinking, but in some ways it's doing, and that's coming from me, I've heard you give this talk before, and I watched myself not do as much as I really should have. So I'm excited for the continual reminder, but my encouragement is just what's something you can hack off right now, maybe just a little chunk, and just get started. Start with some of the basics.
That's great. So. Well, bottom line, as we've already discussed, is it's for our families, and those are the people that are our loved ones. And I just think that it, in the end, is a great service. So, in that sense, I think it's very godly and a wonderful thing to do. Well, thanks to you both. You guys, this is a great format. Both of your perspectives in a sort of question and answer format is great. So my compliments.
Great. Thanks for your time, Chaz.
You too.